thanks everyone for having me today and for the opportunity to present. So here's kind of the things that I'm hoping to talk about. Over the next bit of time here. I want to really lay out what's the difference between onboarding, on the job training, and internships, because they're all very similar and they can be related and they can go hand in hand, but they're not necessarily all the same. And so I want to reflect on that and spend a little time thinking about that. Then I really want to spend some time sharing about understanding kind of earn and learn approaches and the benefits to some of those approaches. And then also, some tips and tricks on the job training, and really what are some strategic approaches to really make that the most effective. I'll show you also a tracking tool, and then absolutely we'll have time for kind of Q&A at the end, but also while we're going forward, let me know too. So let's kind of set the table and lay the foundation. What are sort of, the differences as we think about these three related but slightly different things, right? So onboarding, if you look at the Society of Human Resources professionals, that refers to the processes in which new hires are integrated into the organization. It includes activities that allow new employees to complete an initial new hire orientation process, as well as learn about the organization and its structure, culture, vision, mission, and values. It's typically is not typically just orientation, and it can usually last really up to 12 months when you think about onboarding. Now, not everyone would necessarily say that, but the idea here with an onboarding is that hopefully, it's really about the person getting their feet wet and learning about, what is the job, but also what is the culture, what is, how does this business operate, how do we work, all those sorts of things. Where on-the-job training is a little different, is that's really hands-on instruction completed at work to learn the core competencies necessary to succeed in an occupation. So you're really going forward and figuring out, okay, what are those core things that I need to know to be successful in this job? And what are those things that I'm going to learn while I'm at work to be successful in the job or in the eventual occupation? And internships, in some instances, could be an on-the-job training experience, but at their core, if you look at, kind of the NACE organization, it's a form of experiential learning that integrates knowledge and theory learned in the classroom with practical application and skills development in a professional setting. I think one of the things that can be different from an internship versus an earn and learn or an on-the-job training experience, one is it really begs the question of, is there a job at the end of the day for this, this person in this role? When they complete their internship, are they going to continue their employment at this organization in a new, more formal, role and paid, and clearly a paid position? Or is this just a classic quote unquote internship where I'm spending some time at a place, but my long-term plan is not necessarily to stay at that place. So I invite folks to kind of think about those things and how they may relate, but also, clearly, are different too. So as we think about an earn and learn approach, I run the pipeline program here at Department of Labor and Industry, and that's one of those approaches. I'll share a little bit about apprenticeship as well. Pipeline at its core, it's a source of support to employers to develop their own employment-based dual training. And so the idea here is you're combining, you either currently work for the company or the organization, maybe at a lower skilled position, but you show an interest and an aptitude to move up if you were just given some additional training and support. Or on the flip side, you are recruited to come work for that company, and they start you at a slightly lower position, but as you advance in your training, you'll be able to move up and move forward within the organization. We operate in 4 industries. They're advanced manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, and IT. And we affectionately like to joke, pipeline, it wouldn't be a government program if it wasn't also an acronym. And so pipeline stands for private investment, public education, labor, and industry experience. And when you're thinking about employment-based training or earn and learn training, really what you're getting at is you're combining some structured on-the-job training with some formal education. For our program, typically that's going to be at a community college, but it absolutely does not have to be. It could be a bachelor's, it could be a master's. We're even in the process now of talking about adding a dentist as an occupation, because there's a way to do that, where you're combining some on the job training with some formal education. And so, but the idea here is you're putting these two things together of on the job training paired with that formal related instruction. And you see some great benefits to this approach. For the employers, here's some of the main things that we hear from the companies that we work with. One, you're really in the driver's seat. You're building and shaping your own workforce. You're creating a new skilled worker pipeline. You're getting some production from workers while they train. So you're not necessarily in this tough position where you're like, oh boy, I got to wait for them to finish all of this. No, you're getting some productivity from them immediately. And then also, typically, this can be a great tool for both recruitment and retention. And I'll just say a little bit more about that. On the recruitment side, companies and organizations that do earn and learn employment-based kind of training and help pay for some of that training, whether it's through their own funding or funding from the state, that can be a great recruitment tool to be able to say to an employee, hey, or prospective employee, hey, you're going to come here, you're going to earn a paycheck right away. We're going to teach you, through some on-the-job training. We're going to pair it with this formal education, show you how to advance in your career here. And oh, by the way, either through some of our own money, through like tuition reimbursement, or through some funds available through the state, because there's grant funding for pipeline to help pay for the cost of education, or a combination of those two things, you're going to have little or no student debt. And, at a time where student debt exceeds, it's over credit card debt in this country, it's a real factor, and it can be a real motivating factor for potential employees to say, hey, that's a pretty sweet deal. I want to come work for this company. And then on the flip side, we very often hear from employers who do this kind of approach that they see a reduction in turnover, so that they see benefits to retention. And they see this for a number of factors, and reasons. One, it really shows that the company that they care about the employee, they're investing in them, they want them to advance in their career, and they're clearly showing them how to, which can be a pretty motivating factor. The other thing that can be really helpful that comes across in this kind of approach and then this opportunity is they're doing often some kind of mentorship components. And we know from just what we hear from employers that the more relationships you have at work, the more likely you are to stay at that place of work. And so, even though you may get a tiny increase in wages if you go across the street, you're not necessarily motivated to do that, because now I'm here and I feel supported and I'm being trained and I've got this great mentor who I've now become friends with, and I've got this great relationship. And why would I want to leave that kind of a system of support to go someplace else? And so, that's just one other benefit to this kind of idea of an earn and learn approach. And for the worker, the benefits are obvious, right? They're employed right away. They're doing job training while they work. Typically, as they advance in their training, they're going to get some additional wage increases. They're mastering these in-demand skills, and very often they're earning, degrees, certificates, industry-recognized credentials, et cetera, that are only going to continue to help them grow in their career. And so I wanted to share those are kind of the benefits. The other thing in this approach that's very important and central to the work that we do at Pipeline is that it's a competency-based approach to training. And so for each one of the occupations that we work with, we've got one of these corresponding pyramids that really lays out what does it take to be successful in this occupation? What do I need to know? What are those core competencies I've got to be able to master in order to, in this example, be a good machinist slash CNC operator? And so, what the way this is laid out is we talk to employers and we ask them, okay, I'm using the example of machinists. What does it take to be a good machinist? And they tell us, well, you got to know these certain things. And then we ask them, okay, but help us drill down a little further. What am I typically going to learn through on-the-job training? And what am I going to typically learn through some formal education? And so if you're looking on our website at any one of our pyramids, that's what's mapped out. It's a general roadmap for thinking about how to learn these core competencies. And so the occupation-specific competencies tend to be the things that somebody's going to learn through on-the-job training. The industry sector and industry-wide technical competencies tend to be the kind of things that somebody's going to learn through some of that formal education. Again, that could be a community college, that could be a bachelor's, et cetera. And then workplace, academic, and personal effectiveness tend to be the kind of things that either the person is going to learn before they even came to the job, so they already have some of these skills, or they'll just be kind of further enhanced in both settings, whether that's the on-the-job training or the formal related instruction. Lastly, we always leave the employer-specific requirements blank because we recognize that every employer is a little different, and they might have some things that aren't listed on this pyramid, but that they really want to train their people in. And we would say, absolutely, make that a part of your training, incorporate those things. So I wanted to share this as a tool because they're available for all of the 75 occupations that we have, and they're a straight steal from the U.S. Department of Labor, by the way. We didn't just make these up. We're borrowed and enhanced from what already kind of existed with U.S. Department of Labor. But they're a way to think through how do you map out the competencies to succeed in these jobs. The other thing that I want to share is I talked about our program, the Pipeline program. That's one opportunity for an earn and learn model. But I just want to briefly share, and I won't spend too much time going into it, but we also at our agency are the home to registered apprenticeship. And registered apprenticeship goes even a little bit further beyond the scope of a pipeline experience, because in addition to earning any degree or certificate that an employee may earn along the way, they're also going to earn a nationally recognized registered apprenticeship certificate issued by the state of Minnesota that really demonstrates that they've mastered that occupation. And so there are some additional requirements that go along with a registered apprenticeship. Typically, it's a minimum number of hours for on-the-job training or a minimum number of hours for related instruction. Although there are ways to do it in a competency-based way purely, or kind of a hybrid of the two. The other thing that is a little different from pipeline versus registered apprenticeship is in a registered apprenticeship, the person really needs to be working full-time, at least 32 hours a week. And in pipeline, we have a little bit more flexibility where the person could potentially be working part-time. Lastly, in a registered apprenticeship opportunity, they also have to do some safety training. There needs to be a safety component to their work. But it's a great model. It is really, I would say, the gold standard of an earn and learn kind of approach because it's incredibly robust. And so I wanted to share that. The other thing that I want to just mention when we talk about registered apprenticeship is, it has a long history in construction and the trades, but it does not have to be in those industries. We are adding at our agency new occupations in healthcare. We're adding new occupations in IT, new occupations in ag. There's occupations in the energy sector, utilities, all, and the sky's kind of the limit. for what could potentially be a registered apprenticeship. So I wanted to share that too, that, while there may be this kind of perception that it can only be construction and the trades, yes, we've got a great history there, but it's more and more employers are finding that this kind of model could work in other industries too. And so I invite you all to consider that, or check out our registered apprenticeship too.
So Dan, before you move on, I have
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, and this could maybe be healthcare as well. So we think of healthcare, sometimes we think of, the insurance companies and the hospitals, but, state and county jobs are healthcare too.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then same with IT. Can you talk a little bit more? Like, do you have to be quote unquote kind of an IT company, like a software development or IT provider?
No, thanks so much for that question, Beth. I really appreciate it. And no, we recognize, I think, more and more everybody has IT needs, right? Regardless of what your business is, everybody has IT needs. And so you do not have to be a Google or something like that to leverage these kind of programs for IT training. We share, for Pipeline, our largest grantee, for example, for IT training was a really large healthcare system in the Twin Cities, because, yeah, they have healthcare needs, but they also have a massive IT department that they needed to train people in. We also, for Pipeline, have had a school district, for example, that had an IT professional that needed some training. We've worked with a manufacturer who had used the program in the past for traditional manufacturing kind of jobs, but realized, hey, we've got a guy on staff, an IT guy who could benefit from some additional training, and so could we leverage it for that? And so absolutely, that's a great question, Beth. IT really spans the gambit, and for healthcare, I will share, for Pipeline, for example, we are working with the city of St. Cloud, because they operate a senior center that's run by the city, but that has some very clear healthcare kind of positions that they are training people for, who happen to work at the city's senior center. So again, there's an example where it's a local government unit, but clearly is performing healthcare functions. So yeah, no, great question. I wanted to share, as we talk about on the job training. So what we've kind of learned over the years for our program is, and this is, to be candid, it's general. There are probably other ways or approaches as well, but we've learned that there are 5 really great common types of effective on the job training. And these are the ones that we like to share. So job shadowing is an approach and a method. Probably the most common out of all of them is a job shadowing approach, right? Where somebody's working at your company, your organization, and they're following a lead person or a number of lead people and seeing kind of what they do, and to learn for themselves. Mentorship, which can go along with job shadowing, but can be even like a next step up, where you really have a formal opportunity for somebody to mentor someone, really to connect with them, to teach them, offer them the opportunity to ask questions, be a go-to for that person as they're doing their on-the-job training, those sorts of things. A cohort-based training model. So some companies find it really helpful to say, we've got a group of folks who are, maybe they're all new employees, or they're all looking to, come from one role to the next as they advance. So we put them together as a cohort, and maybe that cohort meets periodically to share what they're learning, to work on projects together, that sort of stuff. So that can be a really good approach to OJT. An assignment-based project evaluation approach. So very often, one of the things that we think is really important as a principle of on-the-job training is you need to be able to create an opportunity for people to try things and to fail. It shouldn't necessarily just always be what they're doing in their job, although that can be a part of it. If the idea here is that someone is training to be successful in a new role or in an enhanced role, you need to give the opportunity for that person to try some projects and to be candid to make a mistake, right? Because they're learning and they're still trying to figure this out and be able to enhance and move forward. And so you want to create some of those opportunities where they could work on a project or a task, have it be evaluated, but also have them have the understanding that they know, God forbid I make a mistake or I screw something up, it's not going to cost me my job, right? I'm still learning, and that's okay. And so an assignment-based approach can really help that as one strategy. And then lastly, we do see some companies really succeed with a discussion-based approach to training. And that can look like, for example, you've got an employee or a group of employees who are doing, some on-the-job training, and periodically they're going to be presented to by various leaders throughout the company, or someone who might, sometimes we'll see it as like quote unquote lunch and learns, right? So they'll have an opportunity where they take a break from their current tasks, and somebody comes and presents and discusses with them, on a new skill or a task or something like that. It can also be an opportunity, when we're thinking about discussion based, to literally get together with other peers in the company and discuss, what are you learning? What's new? What are other techniques? Things like that. And so these are kind of 5 approaches that we've seen work really well, that can be really useful and beneficial. One thing that I want to share here, because it is a really, really important tip when you're thinking about creating on-the-job training, is that as important as it is to get the buy-in and the feedback from the person doing the training, it is equally important that the trainers buy in and support it. You never want a scenario where you have an employee who's going about their job, and then all of a sudden they're asked, hey, I want you to mentor this person. And the person says, well, wait a minute. I don't really know anything about mentorship. I don't really want to be a mentor. It's not my thing. And now you're saying, no, it's really important. I want you to be a mentor. Well, guess what? That's going to fall flat on its face and not be a success, right? So you want to have buy-in from whoever's going to be doing the training. And you also want to acknowledge, because we see this all the time, and we give advice to employers who are thinking about this, that just because someone may have the most content expertise in a given occupation, that doesn't mean they're going to be the best trainer. So I see it all the time, for example, with welders. I'll be working with a manufacturing company, and they'll say, well, Jim is the best welder here. He's a phenomenal welder. He's been here for 20 years. I want him to lead it. And they ignore the fact that, yeah, Jim might be the best welder, but guess what? His people skills stink. He doesn't like to train others. He's kind of grumpy. He wants to stay to his own and just be a really good welder. Well, guess what? You don't want that person leading your training, right? And so we always invite companies to, as you're thinking about an on-the-job training approach, really be thinking about who's going to lead it. Do they feel supported as trainers to be leading that? And are they going to have a place to go to when they maybe have questions about how, what exactly should I be training these people in? What approaches should I be using? Those sorts of things. They need to feel supported too. So it's not just the person who is being trained, but also the trainer. And so we just encourage that. And folks, when you're thinking about implementing an on-the-job training program, to take that into account. I also lastly just wanted to share, we have a resource on our website for all of the occupations that we've approved. A very common tool that is not necessarily required, but it can be really helpful, is to track on-the-job training. And so we have it laid out for all of our core competencies. This is just an example of just the first couple of competencies for a CNC machinist. And it can be helpful to really lay out there, okay, who's the trainer? What kind of mode of training did you use? When did you start? When did you complete? About how many hours did it take? And it's just a way that can sometimes be really helpful as you're thinking about creating training initiatives, to realize, boy, we should track this kind of stuff, because oftentimes what sometimes happens is, if you're not tracking in some capacity, you run into these kind of situations where it's like, well, did Jeff learn that thing? Yeah, I think he did. But did Susie? I can't really remember. Um, and as a company or an organization, you're going to benefit a lot when you can demonstrate that you've got some consistency, and that you're holding kind of everybody to the same to similar standards and similar measures of accountability, and using some kind of a tracking tool can help you do that. And so we've created those for the occupations that we have on our website, and they serve as kind of a reference or a resource. And so I wanted to share that. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and really just kind of welcome the opportunity to open it up for questions here. Uh, Hopefully, maybe those are some new ways of thinking about things, or maybe a refresher, et cetera. But I'd love to spend some time here with you all to answer any questions you might have, or to share any observations you may have about your own experiences.
While we wait for people to formulate questions, since I am having issues with my screen sharing, I went ahead and put the link in for next month's expert insights into the webinar chat. And I'm wondering, Dan, you said you had a couple of resources from your website. Do you want to pop your website into the chat as well? And that way people can, we'll
Sure.
share it out in an email as well, but at least they'd have the opportunity to just go click. I always find that to be easier. So next month, we're talking about enterprise level change and having models to create enterprise level change. So that'll be an interesting piece. Hopefully you guys are receiving the links. I'm not seeing any questions come in from the group. You can do Q&A, you can do chat, I've got you up. I think if you raise your hand, I will see that and can unmute you. So lots of options. You must have done a really good job, Dan.
Well, thank you. I hope this was helpful for folks to think through.
Oh, wait, sorry. Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So we have a question of, have you been able to implement a dual training pipeline with a state agency?
That's a great question. We have done this once in the past. So I've been here for about 5 years, and before I started, there was some collaboration with Minute, and so Minute had done this in some capacity for training for some IT professionals. So yes, that was done. It's been a while, but
been a hot minute, but
yeah, right. But they did do this program. Yeah.
And somebody let me know the chat is disabled, and I didn't set this up, so I apologize. I am unable to. I don't have the skills to undo that. But if you type in the Q&A, or if you raise your hand, we can take questions that way. So I think and the state agency person said excellent. So I bet you'll be hearing from that state agency. So
yeah, absolutely. Welcome the opportunity.
And I know we've had some county folks sign up. Have you ever done a dual pipeline training program with a county?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that. I don't think there's nothing that would prevent us from doing that.
Okay.
So we absolutely could.
Right.
I don't think we have. Like I said, we've done it with the city of St. Cloud, and we've done it with a school district in the Rochester area. We haven't worked yet with a county, but again, as long as it's one of these occupations that would relate to the work at the county, there would be nothing that would prevent us from doing that.
And I think I also heard you say that if there's an occupation that's in high demand and kind of fits the model, you entertain those suggestions. People can bring those forward and say, you know,
Yeah, no, thank you for mentioning that. That's a great point too. So we're always interested in adding occupations. So for example, we actually are right now in the process of probably adding 7 new occupations. So for example, we're looking to add a veterinarian for agriculture. We're looking to add industrial production manager for manufacturing, kind of that plant manager kind of role. And then in healthcare, we're looking at adding histotechs, occupational therapists, licensed independent clinical social workers, and a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. So yeah, absolutely. If you ever look at our website and you find that there isn't an occupation, but you have a need for it, as long as it fits our 4 industries and lends itself to this kind of model, we're happy to entertain the idea of potentially adding that occupation. Just
and
reach out to them.
when I listen to your examples too, I think you're willing to figure out how to fit high demand occupations. Like, I guess normally with like healthcare, I wouldn't go right to a drug and alcohol counselor. So it's worth reaching out to you to say, this is our high demand occupation. And you could say, I think we can make that fit in IT. That might fit in healthcare. Not every time, but you're
Right. Right. Well, for licensed alcohol and drug counselor, we were looking at, for example, it's, insurance covers a lot of that work, right? It's clearly has a connection to mental health. Hospitals employ those kind of folks, in addition to other kind of treatment facilities. And so that's why we kind of felt like, that could be a healthcare job.
And then even if I guess to say, even if you are like, oh, I have this occupation, it doesn't fit any of this, the OJT tracking sheet is still a helpful tool. And I think that skills pyramid where you figure out, here are the skills this occupation needs, but when in the life cycle of the employee are they getting those skills? It doesn't all have to be in the first 2 weeks they work for us. So who and where is that happening, right? So
and the idea behind a pipeline experience or a registered apprenticeship experience is that absolutely it's not going to be in those first 2 weeks, right? Like, admittedly, as an employer, you're making a bit of a more long-term commitment and an investment. But the idea here and the benefit is you're getting some productivity right away while they train for that position. And then, once they get into that, they'll be able to succeed, so.
And I also feel like the other use for that is, I know there's been a lot of legacy around position descriptions and just kind of rolling them forward. And people are starting to take a closer look now, even with a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, to say we maybe need to rewrite some of our position descriptions. I feel like if they did that pyramid first, and identified the critical skills for that role, and the pyramid could help draw that out to say, okay, we're not just going to roll over what's been in the PD for all these years, but let's take a fresh look. Let's gather some other stakeholders. That pyramid could really be used to drive a position description going forward as well, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So lots of good uses. So well, I don't have any additional questions. I want to thank you so much, Dan, for being a part of our Expert Insight series today. I found the information most helpful. I will send out a follow-up email to folks with links to the website. And Dan has got a couple of listening sessions coming up where he'll be listening to employers. And I'll try to get those links in as well, but you can reach out to Dan. He travels the state and is always listening to employers about what their needs are. And so I encourage you to attend one of those sessions so that you get on his radar and you get on the Department of Labor's radar, and that they get real information in real time to better serve the people in the state that are employing people. So,
yeah. Well, thanks so much, Beth. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for having me.
Thanks you, Dan. Thanks to the rest of us for joining you. Hope I see you in February. All righty. Bye.
Have a good rest of the day, everyone.